My name is Carlos Morales. I will be presenting War in the Middle East. War. Something that has been around since the existence of man. Countless wars, countless battles within those wars, victories, losses, depending on what side of the fence you were on. Allow us to turn back the hands of time, taking us 19 years back to the year of 2001. A year most Americans will never forget. Many of us, including myself, were only babies, with no recollection of where we were at or of what we were doing with our families when this tragedy occurred. We, of course, are talking about the unfortunate event of 9/11, the day that would ultimately resort to the United States waging war on terrorism and a war that we still fight to this day. This means that American troops have been sacrificing, fighting, and dying overseas on foreign soil in order to carry out the mission of the United States, basically ever since I was born. Everybody who was old enough to understand what was happening remembers where they were at or what they were doing when they found out about the act of terrorism. For many, it was a calling to be the first to defend our Constitution, which led them into joining the armed forces in order to protect our country and its people. I bring you all here today to speak about where the darkest things of what one human being can do to another takes place. We are talking about war. We, of course, are not talking about any war, however. We're talking about the ongoing war that has plagued the Middle East with terror and violence. The same war that a lot of us probably have had some sort of family who has fought or is currently fighting in to keep us safe. Nowadays, Americans are still very separated in terms of their political views and moral values. Instead of agreeing to disagree, most people in America either stand on the left or they stand on the right. Very few are smart enough to do what we did when this tragedy happened, and that is meeting in the middle. I was not old enough to see it for myself, but the ones who were there to speak of how great and how truly inspiring it was to see all Americans come forth as one. At that time, it did not matter who you were voting for. It did not matter if our moral values were the same. It did not matter if we agreed on the same policies. None of this mattered. What mattered at that time was coming together to get to the conclusion of we love our country. What are we as Americans going to do about this? Which is in fact what weighed in the heavy decision of protecting the nation we built by leaving our homes and going overseas straight into where the heart of terrorism lies, the Middle East. The beginning of the war was horrific to say the least. War itself is truly horrifying, but this was a war like none of us have seen before. Going into a completely new environment from which we are not used to is always one of the greatest challenges. In World War II, it was urbanized warfare, where Allied troops pushed through urban cities in France and Germany to stop the Axis. In Vietnam, our troops had to fight a new and different style of war, which is jungle warfare. They had to adapt to the intense and scorching heat and humidity, which is heavy within itself, but that was the least of their worries, seeing as there were Vietnamese snipers hiding in trees and random kamikaze troops hiding in foxholes all throughout these jungles that were being patrolled. Moving on to current war, and we come across a new type. Not just the fact that this one takes place in a sandy desert, but the enemy harbors new weapons of mass destruction. War has never been clean, nor has it ever been pretty. It has always been dirty, and it has always been ugly. There is no way to say which war is or was worse than the other, but in my opinion, troops have to deal with something catastrophic, which I would personally be most paranoid about more than anything else, and we are talking about IEDs, or improvised explosive devices, which are bombs that are made by terrorists. I could go on and on about the disgustingly creative ways that they use these devices against us, but also against their own people. I will only give you a few examples in order to paint a real picture of the differences in all of these wars. Most know about the countless IEDs which are set on main roads, which are there to target heavy infantry vehicles which carry American troops. Another way is they will strap an IED onto another human being, which is usually going to be somebody who is mentally handicapped, and they will send them into a crowd of civilians or American troops. And well, you know what happens after that. On the bright side of things, after years and years of countless sacrifices, after years and years of many casualties, the US, with the help of other allied countries, are now getting to the point of the war where we are occupying less bases overseas in the Middle East, and every year we are pulling more and more troops out. That is, of course, up until we had what I like to call the Great Scare, because Trump called in a drone strike which killed an Iranian general, which could have potentially started World War III. Thankfully, the Iranian chief said he does not wish death to America or the American people, but that he wishes death to Trump and the other higher ranking military personnel who were personally responsible for that drone strike, which means we avoided a whole war. War is the most raw, unfiltered version of what one man can do to another man for the greater cause that is valued to that individual. This war has lasted through the presidency of 3 different people, but war is something that has happened since the first civilizations were formed, and unfortunately, it will continue to happen long after we are dead and gone. And who knows, it could even happen again within our lifetime. It already has once.